Hello VC, Uncle Roddus back again. Here's a bit of a lunchtime video. As you can see, I'm in my work clothes at the moment. Just had a nice box arrive when I got home for lunch, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I was in town last week, early last week, for whatever reason. Had to drop something into town for work related. And snuck into the record shop, as you do. Right, okay. So I picked up 4 records, and playing in the background is this one here, the Menfred Quintet Horizons. Now this is a Japo Records release from 1980. Japo Records was an offshoot of ECM, so we have the same ECM quality. The vinyl pressings are stunning. I've only got one other Japo release that I've managed to find so far. Menfred was, now this album and a couple of other albums, samples or tracks from them were reissued on an ECM CD sometime in the mid-2000s, I think, which I actually picked up second hand and was quite impressed. And so when I saw these originals in the shop, I grabbed them. They weren't too badly priced. This is what's playing in the background. And then another one of his that I picked up on the day is this one, Light Lines. This is from 1978. They didn't actually put out a lot of music. I think there was only 3 or 4 records, and 3 of them are on, or 3 parts of 3 of them are on that CD that I do have. Don't know any of the names of the guys on it, but this is a German release from 1978, recorded in 1977. Yeah, and yeah, as you would expect with ECMs, sound quality is stunning. Well, it's not an ECM, but an ECM offshoot. Stunning sound, and these are in particularly good condition vinyl-wise, so pleased with that. I was rapt to find this in the shop. Been looking for it for a while. A hugely famous album for people who know this sort of thing. Yes, Soft Machine's third. I've actually never owned a copy of this. I have some CDs of theirs. I used to have some vinyl. I actually was introduced to Soft Machine purely by chance. I saw a copy of a record of theirs on the wall of the shop many, many years ago. It was a triple LP compilation called Triple Echoes. So it came in a box, and I picked it up second hand for a reasonable price. It was the cover that attracted me. It looked really cool. I knew nothing about who they were or what they were. I mean, this was way back in the early 90s maybe, or the late 80s. Yeah, and you know, I really love that album. So I picked this one up for a reasonable price. It's not as available in New Zealand as you'd expect it to be. It is fairly well available. This is the sleeve's all intact, but it's got a lot of ring wear. But the vinyl itself is actually pretty good. There's a wee bit of noise, but I've cleaned it up and it actually plays very well. And yeah, man, this is a really, really good LP. Unfortunately, it isn't the best high fidelity wise, and a couple of people made that comment on Facebook about it. They were quite disappointed with the fidelity of it. The recordings here, they aren't the best, unfortunately, which is a shame because it sort of detracts from the really good music. But anyway, so that was cool. And then I've picked up this one here, a New Zealand one, as I do. This is a Tall Dwarfs release, one of their EPs. This is Flying Nun Records. This is actually a Flying Nun reissue, so that's not the original, but it came out reissued a couple of years later. Apparently, this is according to Discogs and the thing. This is an EP. It's only got 6 songs, 7 songs. 6 songs from 1983. Yeah, no, actually, I think this was reissued in 1987 on Flying Nun as well. So not quite original. Tall Dwarfs is Chris Knox and what was the other guy's name? Alex Bathgate, something like that. They actually played together in the Toy Love, and I think even the Enemy went right back to the roots, the very start. They put out a bunch of EPs in the early 80s on Flying Nun before they put out their first album. Those EPs are actually quite hard to get your hands on nowadays, and I did pay a reasonable high amount for that. Browsing the internet a couple of weeks back now, and actually I got an email. Actually, that's what it was. I got an email. Superior Viaduct is a company that I have bought some music of, and they have actually released some interesting New Zealand stuff occasionally, but I'd actually picked up some reissues of some early 70s French type kind of weird music. There was the Illich albums and the ZNR album I picked up. I'm not sure if I've actually bought anything else off them. I'm pretty sure they had some New Zealand stuff on their site too that I haven't actually bought. Anyway, I could be wrong on that, but they sent an email out and they had a bit of a deal going on The Fall. The Fall, as most of all know, was an English post-punk band led by Mark E. Smith from the late 70s, and they are still going today, and they put out untold number of albums. They were a massive band for me in my youth. I discovered them via a late night radio show that used to beam down from Auckland after about 10 o'clock at night. A guy called Barry Jenkins, who was known as Dr. Rock, who fronted another seminal TV program as well called Radio with Pictures, which was also a big influence on what I listened to back in my school days. But yeah, he had a show on after midnight, and there has been many people over the years who said that he had a huge influence on what they were listening to, and he was playing imported post-punk and punk and stuff like that back in the late 70s, early 80s, and I had this little transistor radio, like about that big, that my nana gave me for Christmas in 1980, I think it was, and I used to have that on my pillow next to me at night, turned down very low so that no one else in the house could hear it, and right next to my ear, and I would listen to this guy, and he introduced me to some amazing music, stuff that you wouldn't hear here in New Zealand otherwise, and it was a big influence on me. And I mean, I remember hearing some of the first songs that I first heard there that really that I really got into were things like Talking Heads. He played Once in a Lifetime. That absolutely blew me away. I think that was the first place I heard The Human Leaves Love Action before they got really big. But then things like Bad Brains, Pay to Come, 7-inch single that he played was absolutely mind-blowing for me. He played Crass. He played like Systematic Death off their Penis Envy album, which is one of my all-time favourite Crass songs and Crass albums. He played like Angelic Upstarts, Wire, 12XU. Me and a mate of mine, we used to listen to this show every night, and we'd talk about it when we caught it. He was at a different school at that stage from me, but we used to catch up and talk about what we'd heard on the phone, on the TV. Anyway, so The Fall. So yes, Superior Viaduct have done a reissue of a whole bunch of really early Fall albums. Apparently it's the first time they've been reissued in the US since the original release dates. I'm not sure how big The Fall were in the States back in those days. They were certainly pretty big in New Zealand, I think. Actually, to be honest, I think, and it's not really acknowledged as such, but I think The Fall had a massive influence, especially on the Flying Nun bands in New Zealand. The story was that The Fall came and played and did a bunch of shows around New Zealand back in 1982. You know, I know Flying Nun was already going by then, but I think a lot of the guys knew who The Fall were, and from the sounds of what I've read up about it, the concerts were mostly attended by the musicians of the time, you know, the groups, and that, especially maybe down here in the South Island. I was a little bit young to see them at that stage, although I do know who they were, and I don't recall even remembering that they'd played here, to be honest, but I was probably a little bit young to see them. I think they were playing pubs. There's an album called Fall in a Hole, which was released on Flying Nun, and that was a bit controversial. I used to have a copy of that. That was controversial because Chris Knox, who'd recorded it, believed that he'd had the permission from Mark E. Smith to release the album. He had actually played the tapes for Mark E. Smith. When the album was released and copies turned up in England, they got a pretty prompt letter from Smith or Smith's record company saying cease and desist. and they had to hand over what copies they had left and the royalties, etc., the costs that they made. So it was a bit of a disaster for Flying Nun. That album is quite hard to get your hands on there. It usually sells for around $100 on Discogs. But anyway, I better move on to the records. So the deal was I got for like $70 US or $80 US. I got 7 of these reissues. The Fool's first album, Live at the Witch Trials, man, it took me a long time to get an original copy of this back in the day, because they weren't really released in New Zealand. They were on import, so I'd had several Fool albums and singles I'd picked up over the years, but this one eluded me for quite some time. But I did finally find a copy of it. Of course, I sold all those records back in the 90s. I've just had a quick listen to this on the turntable, and yeah, it sounds fantastic. The vinyl was very quiet and it sounds very, very good. Dragnet is the next one. So these albums are all very early Fool albums. So Dragnet was their second album. This is actually a compilation per se. I think some of these things were released on EPs and 45s. Just looking at the track list. That's actually really interesting. It's been so long since I've heard it. I actually think I've got a CD of this, to be honest. It's slightly different from what I remember, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. Actually, no, I am. I'm thinking of a different record. It was a compilation. They had like things like Bingo Master, Breakout, Fiery Jack, which were on EPs. Actually, yes. That was a compilation which I can't remember the name of, but I do have it on CD. I'll have a look for it in a minute. Grotesque was a particularly favourite album of mine of the Fool back in the day, from 1980. Room to Live was one it took me quite a while to track down back in the day, but also I did finally get a copy of it. This is a live LP. Not sure the date of recording, but 1982, there it is. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And then this is another really fantastic Fool album again, which is this was the one that was I think it actually got a release in New Zealand, quite possibly. I remember it was probably one of the first ones I bought of theirs. Hex Induction Hour. And then the last one of the Fool albums is this one. This was later on, 1983. Well, not that much later on, but the Fool's music changed quite a lot for this, but I still really liked it. There were 2 more albums that came out after this: The Wonderful and Frightening World of the Fool, and the last album, what was it called? From about 1986, there were 2 more. Anyway, after that, really lost interest in them, to be honest, their music. That was as far as I went with them. Over the years, I've tried to listen to some of their latest stuff, but to be honest, it doesn't do anything for me at all. And finally, as part of the bundle, the Slates EP, 6 tracks from 1981. There's some really fantastic stuff on this too. This was another one which I managed to get my hands on back on the day originally, but it was again quite difficult to get back in those days. But because they were so popular in New Zealand, they did get imported quite a bit, so there are quite a lot of Fool albums floating around. Not sure how often you see them in the shops, to be honest. I don't keep an eye out, but I don't know. Yeah, it was one of those impulse things that I saw the email, I had a look at it, and it was a good deal, and I'm pretty pleased to have all those again. I say I do have a few of them on CD. Now, what was that CD compilation that I was talking about? Excuse me a moment. Where's that? Oh, actually, yes, it was this one here. Early Fall 77 to 79. Yeah, I actually had this on vinyl originally. Yeah, Bingo Masters, Breakout, and I see now Dice Man, Psychic Dancehall are actually on the Dragnet album, Fiery Jack. Yeah, excellent. That's an excellent compilation actually, because a lot of those tracks weren't available anywhere else at the time. I did pick up a few singles from the Fool back in the day that aren't available on albums. I think I actually have a compilation CD with a lot of those on, but yeah, no, I just can't say how massive the Four were for me, and I really believe that, you know, they've had a massive influence on the New Zealand music scene. It's not talked about so much. I mean, when they talk about Flying Nun, they talk about the Velvet Underground, their influence, the Velvet Underground, and yeah, they don't talk too much about the other stuff, to be honest. What else they talk about? You know, I mean, the Flying Nuns had a big influence on other bands like Pavement and Sonic Youth, although Sonic Youth were around at the time Flying Nun started up, but Thurston Moore, he's a massive Flying Nun fan, a New Zealand music fan. But yeah, yeah, the Fall, to me, I think they had a huge impact on New Zealand music. So that was that. So that's our lot. That's my video for now. This video probably won't get posted for several weeks. It's actually, I've still got another 3 in the back logs to get posted, but it'll get there eventually. Anyway, happy collecting, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.